Good evening. You are watching ReNews in English. I am Anna Margarian. Russia has responded to comments from the Prime Minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan. This comes after the Prime Minister suggested his country is more likely to leave the Russian-led military alliance, the CSTO, than to return to it. Today, Vladimir Putin's spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said that leaving the alliance is Armenia's sovereign affair. However, Peskov also mentioned he sees contradictions in Armenia's foreign policy. Here is what he said.
At the same time, they are showing interest in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which means they are pursuing, as they see it, a multi-vector policy. But of course, we are interested in maximum cooperation in all vectors, in all directions. In addition to the multilateral format, we are also united by very close bilateral relations. Well, we intend to continue developing them. We know what Armenia's membership in the EAEU brings, so we'll see what rapprochement with the EU will bring. Everything is known in comparison.
Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan spoke yesterday about Armenia's foreign policy during his press conference. He explained the government's current foreign plans. Relations with Russia are changing. They will not be the same as before. Normalizing relations with Turkey is very important. Pashinyan stated this in the key to protecting Armenia's sovereignty. Experts have shared their opinions on these statements. My colleague Ani Hovanesyan collected their comments.
According to Nikol Pashinyan, Armenia is currently at a crossroads of transforming relations with Russia and positive expectations from Turkey and the West. No matter how the Prime Minister chooses his diplomatic phrasing, it is obvious to experts Armenia is trying to see off the Russian train. One piece of evidence is the reduction of Russian information influence.
Some Russian television channels have crossed all possible lines, but also for the reasons I had mentioned. I would not want us to be forced to make their decision.
Pashinyan emphasized that Armenia wants to simultaneously build partnerships in the north, south, east, and west. As we already know, following the Armenian foreign minister's visit to China, our country expressed its desire to become a member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Currently, Armenia holds the status of a dialogue partner in the organization. Pashinyan came away from his meeting with the president of Turkey with only positive impressions. He returned to Armenia without tangible results, but with tangible hopes.
I have no doubt that we will eventually reach the point where diplomatic relations will be established, the border will be opened, and so on.
Experts positively assess Pashinyan's steps toward the West. Turkologist Hakup Chakrian believes that if Armenia becomes a member of the EU, the Turks themselves will rush to establish diplomatic relations with Armenia.
We should have severed ties with Russia a long time ago. Since we have good relations with the European Union, France, other countries, with the United States, with India, we must place the emphasis on this and further develop these relationships.
Chakrian draws historical parallels with the situation in the region. According to him, we have been living for hundreds of years with the illusion of Russia the savior.
When the USSR collapsed, the South Caucasus was considered a zone of Russian dominance. A competitive struggle began between the West and Russia.
Edward Sharmazan, a member of the RPA, Republican Party of Armenia, believes that Pashinyan is trying to do the impossible, but not in a positive sense. It is impossible to be a partner to everyone.
For influence, it's a bit unclear. Nikol is going there and staying in the EAAU and going to Shanghai and is on good terms with Turkey. Armenian tomatoes, cucumbers, fruits, canned goods, flowers, where is all of it? Open your eyes and look. In the EAAU market, and let me say about the EAAU, it's impossible to combine the incompatible. You can't leave the CSTO and stay in the EAAU. It's impossible. It's one package. You can't be an opponent of Russia in the security system or even neutral, and at the same time receive all the benefits that the EAAU, the Russian market, and the EAAU regime provide.
Political scientist Gagik Simonian also positively assesses Pashinyan's initiatives to withdraw from Russian-led structures, saying that there are more than 30 international treaties with the Russian Federation that need to be terminated. In Simonian's opinion, Russia's extensive involvement in various spheres of Armenian life poses a threat.
We have the task of restoring the level of sovereignty that will give us the opportunity to pursue a much freer, much more promising policy, both in the region and on the global stage. The EAAU and the CSTO will not give us the opportunity to keep pace with the challenges of the times. The EU will provide these opportunities. NATO will provide these opportunities.
On the one hand, Pashinyan is trying to balance Armenia's position between Russia, the West, and regional powers, attempting to sit on all chairs at once. But on the other hand, according to analysts, in doing so, he is becoming unreliable to all partners and turning into a target for criticism. Ani Hovanesyan, Stepan Tigranyan, ReOpen Media.
Speaking about Armenia-EU relations, Prime Minister Pashinyan said that during their visit to Brussels, they were asked if they want to join the EU. He answered yes. The Prime Minister said yesterday at a press conference that at some point in the future, he thinks Armenia will be a member of the European Union. Ekrem İmamoğlu, mayor of Istanbul and opposition leader, was sentenced to 1 year and 8 months in prison. He was charged with insulting an official and making threats after criticizing Istanbul's chief prosecutor. He was cleared of a terrorism-related charge. İmamoğlu was arrested in March, sparkling protests across Turkey. He called the charges political persecution. This came after he was named the opposition candidate for the upcoming presidential elections. Early this morning, Israeli fighter jets attacked Syrian army bases in the northwest. A day earlier, Israel also hit the Syrian army's general staff building and areas near the presidential palace. Overnight, Israeli forces targeted the Mazeh military air base near Damascus. Turkey has condemned the Israeli strikes in southern Syria. In the city of al-Suwaida, controlled by the Druze community, protesters took down the Syrian flag and raised the Israeli one. Syria's interim president al-Shara said the country rejects chaos and supports peace. He allowed Druze leaders to help stop the clashes in al-Suwaida. Israel says the strikes are meant to support the Druze and stop Syria from building up forces near the border.
Clashes continue in Syria, with particularly fierce fighting in the As-Suwaida province between the Druze community and Syrian government forces. The clashes, which began on July 13 between Druze detachments and Bedouin fighters, have resulted in significant losses. According to Syrian sources, the number of casualties has reached 248, of which 90 are Druze, more than 100 are government soldiers, and the rest are Bedouins. The Druze, who make up about 3% of Syria's population and mainly reside in As-Suwaida, are known for their distinct religious and cultural identity. Simply put, there are two main branches in Islam, Shia and Sunni. The Shia, in turn, are divided into several movements, mainly the Twelvers and the Seveners. The Druze are a branch that separated from Ismailism, that's Sevener Islam, but it has since developed and formed to such an extent that they have become a separate ethno-religious group. What does this mean? It's a closed community. They marry among themselves. That is, one is born a Druze, one does not become a Druze. It's impossible to become a Druze. That's how this community works, and they are now spread throughout the Middle East. Today they live in Syria, mainly in an area called Jabal al-Druze, because this mountain holds great significance in their faith, as well as in Jordan and in Israel, mainly on the Golan Heights. Experts assert that this is not a new problem. According to Arabist Hayk Kotrian, these problems were accumulating even during the rule of Bashar al-Assad. This has been a problem in recent times and is linked to the events of 2011 in Syria, when they began the Druze regions, understanding that the central government could not ensure security in many respects, and that Sunni extremist groups posed a threat. After all, this isn't the first escalation we're seeing today, formed self-defense units. Assad tried to suppress aspirations for autonomy, but the Druze maintained their potential and saved their ambitions for a more opportune time. At one time, in Syria, during Assad's rule, Druze autonomy was suppressed, but there were avenues for social mobility. For instance, there were generals who today are actively participating in the actions of the Druze self-defense, and so on, but they continue to be a closed community connected to one another. That is, the Druze of Syria, the Druze of Jordan, the Druze of Israel, of Lebanon, they are all connected to each other by kinship ties because it is a closed community. The involvement of neighboring countries further complicates the situation. Israel is actively participating in the conflict, justifying its bombing of Damascus with the need to protect the Druze community. The problem is that Damascus does not fully control the forces that are at the root of this escalation. Because the jihadist groups that are actually behind all this creates a very serious problem, raising two questions. Does Damascus control these groups or not? If it does, then it's state policy. If it doesn't, then there's a problem with Damascus's ability to govern. That is, in either case, this leads to very dire developments. Hayk Kotrian notes that the Druze community itself is not monolithic, and there are disagreements within it as well. There are three different, so to speak, factions among the Druze, of which only a small one advocates for Israel's support. The other Druze are against outside support because they do not want to become a pawn either. For the rest, this is a situation that is developing every day, every second. One must keep watching to understand, what happens next. The events surrounding the Druze in Syria reveal broader problems related to the governance of the central authorities in the region, the treatment of religious and ethnic minorities, and the influence of extremist groups. Nevertheless, this crisis underscores the need to address not only security issues, but also the political and social problems that continue to threaten stability in Syria and the entire region. This is an attempt. Syria's geographical position is important, and al-Shara, politician Farouk al-Shara, likely referring to the Assad government, translator's note, this is the support the central government is receiving to get everything under its control, but there are forces that are not yet subordinate and are not acting on orders from Damascus. This is because no one wants a chaotic entity like Syria in this specific geographical area, because all communication and transit routes will pass through there. Therefore, they will try to help them here in any way they can, but they will also turn a blind eye to many things. We will see how events unfold. The visit to Azerbaijan is related to energy resources, as was stated, because there is a problem Turkey can no longer provide in Syria with what it has, and they tried to resolve this issue with Azerbaijan via Turkey. But the next stage will be the reconstruction efforts in Syria, where Azerbaijani capital will also play its role. Perhaps one day we will witness the opening of parks and monuments to Heydar Aliyev. This should not be ruled out either. Early in the morning, Israeli Air Force fighter jets carried out strikes on government force bases in northwestern Syria. And the day before, Israeli fighter jets launched a missile strike on the Syrian Army's General Staff Complex and the vicinity of the presidential palace. In the night, the Israelis struck the Mezze military airbase located west of Damascus. Turkey has condemned Israel's attacks in southern Syria.
Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei warned that any new military attack will bring an even stronger response. He said this during a meeting with government officials. Khamenei also said the US is helping Israel and that the aggressor must be held responsible. Earlier, Iran's parliament said Tehran should not restart nuclear talks with the US. Talks will only begin if Washington meets Iran's conditions. The conditions were not listed, but Deputy Foreign Minister Arakchi said Iran wants guarantees that there will be no future attacks on Tehran. Russia has once again launched massive strikes on Ukraine, despite new sanction threats from the United States. President Donald Trump said new tariffs and restrictions against Moscow will be introduced on September 3rd. In response, Russian Security Council Deputy Chairman Dmitry Medvedev said Moscow is not afraid of theatrical threats and will continue its military actions. On the night of July 17th, Russian drones attacked the city of Dnipro. According to local authorities, 22 drones were shot down, but several reacted their targets. One person was killed, 5 were injured, and 3 are in serious condition. Fires broke out in the city and one enterprise was damaged. Nikopol and Dobropolya also came under fire. In Nikopol, 5 people were injured and residential buildings were damaged. In Dobropolya, a bomb was dropped, 2 people were killed, 27 injured, and shops and apartments were destroyed. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called the attack Russian terror and promised a response. Along with ongoing attacks, Russia and Ukraine continue to exchange the bodies of fallen soldiers. Russian official Vladimir Medinsky said Russia returned the bodies of 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers. In return, Ukraine gave back the bodies of 19 Russian soldiers. A fire at a hypermarket in El-Qud, eastern Iraq, has killed 63 people and injured 40. Many others are still missing. Firefighters rescued 45 people and search efforts are still going. The fire started last night. Iraqi authorities have announced 3 days of national grief. The governor of Vasid said those responsible will be punished and lawsuits will be filed against the shopping center's owners. An investigation is underway. Recently, there are serious concerns in Armenia about some Russian TV channels. The TV and Radio Commission says these channels often insult Armenian authorities and citizens. They also share one-sided and distorted comments using emotions and aggression instead of facts. More details in our report.
The assessments and characterizations broadcast on leading Russian TV channels in Armenia have raised certain concerns in our country. The Television and Radio Commission, TRC, notes that these channels often disseminate offensive language directed at state structures and citizens of Armenia, one-sided and distorted commentaries, and emotional and aggressive assessments instead of facts. The assessments and characterizations broadcast on leading Russian TV channels in Armenia have raised certain concerns in our country. The Television and Radio Commission, TRC, notes that these channels often disseminate offensive language directed at state structures and citizens of Armenia, one-sided and distorted commentaries, and emotional and aggressive assessments instead of facts. The Commission has recorded that a number of programs on the RTR Planeta and Channel 1.WorldNet television channels have regularly violated and continue to violate the provisions of the Agreement on Cooperation between Armenia and Russia in the sphere of mass telecommunications. It must be acknowledged that these two Russian television channels continue to include in their broadcasts disinformation and content that provokes public tension, creating fertile ground for physical violence, insults using profanity, and hatred. In our conversation about the legal framework for cooperation between the two countries in the television sphere and the violation of certain clauses, the chairman of the TRC, Tigran Hakopian, noted that he had nothing to add on this topic. So what specific violations has the Commission recorded? Article 4 of the agreement provides for the broadcast of the public television of Armenia throughout the territory of the Russian Federation, but this has not yet been implemented. According to Article 5, the TV channels of the Russian Federation are obliged to comply with the legislation of the Republic of Armenia, to exclude programs with offensive content towards the Armenian people and national values, as well as to refrain from interference in the domestic political life of the RA. According to the Commission's observations, the aforementioned TV channels have repeatedly violated this clause, as well as Article 6, which establishes respect for the rules concerning national holidays and memorial days in the territory of the broadcasting state. Media expert Artur Papian also calls this phenomenon unacceptable.
It is unclear why the public multiplex, which operates on the taxes of Armenian citizens, should provide a frequency to a foreign broadcaster when that broadcaster expresses insults towards the leadership of Armenia and its citizens.
The TRC has appealed to the government and the Ministry of High-Tech Industry, presenting the recorded violations, and has proposed that appropriate steps be taken. Our attempts to get clarification from the Ministry of High-Tech Industry on the details of further steps on this issue were unsuccessful. At a press conference yesterday, Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, when asked if he wants the broadcasting of those Russian channels accused of creating a background of hatred and permissiveness to be stopped in Armenia, noted that Armenia wants to have good, friendly relations with Russia based on mutual respect.
Yes, indeed, some Russian television channels have crossed all permissible boundaries, but based on the foregoing, I would not want us to be forced to make such a decision, as we are not seeking contradictions and conflict situations with Russia.
The TRC has appealed to the government and the Ministry of High-Tech Industry, presenting the recorded violations, and has proposed that appropriate steps be taken. Our attempts to get clarification from the Ministry of High-Tech Industry on the details of further steps on this issue were unsuccessful. At a press conference yesterday, Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, when asked if he wants the broadcasting of those Russian channels accused of creating a background of hatred and permissiveness to be stopped in Armenia, noted that Armenia wants to have good, friendly relations with Russia based on mutual respect. According to political scientist Arman Abovyan, Russian channels do not have a significant influence on public sentiment in our country. In his opinion, this process lies in a different plane.
When the West expands into any region, it takes two actions. It sharply increases its information presence, and it persuades or forces the local authorities to reduce the presence of the opposing side. This happens in different countries, and the situation must be viewed in this context. They will shut them down because the authorities' intentions are obvious. The Russian side's presence in the information field will not diminish because of this. They will move to Telegram and other platforms. People will still watch.
Abovyan believes that the broadcasting of Russian channels will be stopped, which will negatively affect Armenian-Russian relations. We conducted a poll on the streets of Yerevan on this topic. The majority of citizens surveyed are against stopping the broadcast of some Russian TV channels in Armenia. The Television and Radio Commission, TRC, recalls that they have also raised this problem in the annual report submitted to the National Assembly.
For more updates, follow us on YouTube, Telegram, Instagram, X, and Facebook. Daily news and full coverage are available on our official website. I am Anna Markaryan. Stay tuned with ReOpen Media. Bye.